Earth was quiet. Too quiet. Cities hummed softly with lights, but the streets felt empty in a way that made people uneasy. It wasn't war or disaster that caused this silence. No, this was a quiet that came from being forgotten. The stars above seemed colder, as if the universe itself had turned its gaze away. Among the quiet streets, Thomas walked alone. He was not a soldier or a hero or even someone famous. He was just an engineer who loved watching the stars. For years, he had been tracking signals from space, signals that seemed ordinary at first but carried strange patterns. Lately, one signal had caught his attention. It was faint, flickering like a dying candle, and yet it called to him in a way he could not explain. In his small lab, filled with wires, screens, and blinking machines, Thomas studied the signal. It was unlike anything he had seen. It was huge, almost endless, and full of patterns that looked like memories rather than numbers. He ran simulations, checked calculations, and even asked others for help. But no one else seemed to care. Probably just space noise, they said. But Thomas knew it was something alive. Something enormous. Something ancient. He often thought about the elder dragons. Stories of them had survived in myths, in books, in old recordings from explorers long gone. They were said to be beings older than stars themselves, wandering the galaxy and keeping the balance of life. Most humans didn't believe in them anymore. Thomas did. He had always believed that if anyone could exist beyond imagination, it would be the elder dragons. One night, under the dim light of his lab, Thomas made a decision. He could not let the signal fade. He could not let the mystery die without seeing it. He packed a small vessel, enough to survive a long journey, and brought with him only what he needed: some food, his tools, and a notebook. No weapons. No armor. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew fear had no place in curiosity. As his vessel lifted off Earth, Thomas looked down at the blue and green planet. It seemed peaceful, almost asleep. And yet, he felt a pang of sadness. Humanity was small, fragile, and yet it still reached for the stars. Even now, while everything else in the universe seemed to turn away, humans still dreamed. And maybe that was the one thing the elder dragons had never stopped noticing. The journey was long. Days passed as he floated in silence, following the strange signal like a lighthouse in the dark. It was beautiful and lonely at the same time. Stars streaked past his windows, galaxies swirled in colors he had only seen on screens, and he realized how small Earth truly was. Yet he also realized something else. Smallness did not mean weakness. Humans might not be the strongest, the fastest, or the most powerful. But humans never stopped trying. Humans never stopped reaching. Finally, after what felt like forever, the signal grew stronger. It was no longer a faint whisper. It was a voice not in words but in feelings. Waves of loneliness, memories of light, and the sadness of time poured into Thomas's mind as he followed it. His heart pounded with awe and fear. And then he saw it. A shadow moved in the void ahead. Not a spaceship, not a planet, not a comet. Something living. Something enormous. The elder dragon. Its body glimmered like a star just before it dies, soft light pulsing along scales that looked like flowing silver and gold. Its wings stretched across space, thin and fragile yet powerful in their size. Its eyes were not angry or cold. They were tired. They were sad. They looked at Thomas and seemed to recognize him, not as a threat, but as someone who could understand. Thomas's breath caught. He wanted to speak, to call out, but words felt small here. The dragon was so much larger than life and yet so delicate. It floated slowly, almost as if it did not have the strength to move, and its faint glow flickered like the last spark of a candle. It had been waiting. Waiting for someone, maybe anyone who still cared. Thomas reached out with his mind, letting the signal guide him. He felt the dragon's history flow into him, millions of years of watching civilizations rise and fall, of guarding stars, of seeing worlds forget to look up. The dragon was fading, not because it was old, but because no one remembered it anymore. Its purpose had been forgotten. Its light had been ignored. Thomas realized something that made his chest tighten. Humanity might be small, but maybe they were the only ones left who could notice. The human race could still care when everyone else turned away. They could still reach when the universe seemed to forget. And somehow, in that quiet space, Thomas knew that he and the dragon were not alone. They were beginning something new. Something that could change the fate of Earth, the dragons, and perhaps even the stars themselves. The dragon stretched its wings faintly and turned its gaze back to the human. It did not speak. It did not roar. It simply waited. And Thomas, heart pounding, knew that this was only the beginning. Thomas floated in the dark, staring at the elder dragon. Its massive body drifted slowly in space, wings barely moving, glowing faintly like the last light of a dying star. He had never seen anything so beautiful or so sad. It was enormous, yet fragile. It seemed to Thomas that the dragon carried the weight of 1,000,000 years on its shoulders. For a long time Thomas did nothing but watch. He did not move his ship closer. He did not try to touch it. He only let himself feel the presence of the creature, trying to understand it. Slowly he realized the dragon was not angry or threatening. It was waiting. Waiting for someone to see it. Waiting for someone who still cared. He whispered into his communicator, even though he knew the dragon could not hear human words. "I'm here," he said softly. I want to help." The dragon's glow pulsed faintly. It was subtle, but it was enough to tell Thomas that it understood. Thomas reached into the notebook he always carried. He began to draw, not diagrams, not plans, but simple pictures: stars, planets, and small humans reaching upward. He showed them through the ship's window, letting the light reflect off the drawings into the dragon's eyes. The dragon leaned closer, its massive head tilting, curious. It seemed fascinated by the tiny human and the tiny drawings. For hours, Thomas sat in silence, communicating without words. He realized the dragon was not just a creature of strength or power. It was a being of memory, emotion, and history. Its light flickered with every thought and feeling. He could sense the loneliness, the sadness, the weariness of countless millennia. It had watched civilizations rise and fall, stars burn out, and life grow and disappear. And now, it was fading, not because of enemies or age, but because no one remembered it anymore. Thomas felt a deep responsibility. He understood that the elder dragon needed attention, care, and recognition. It needed someone who could see its purpose and keep its memory alive. And he realized that humans, fragile and small as they were, might be the only ones left capable of this. He began to speak softly, telling the dragon about Earth. About cities, forests, oceans, and children who laughed under the sky. About humans who dreamed, who built, who reached for the stars even when the universe seemed indifferent. He did not know if the dragon could understand the words, but he felt it listening. Slowly the dragon's glow grew stronger. It pulsed in rhythm with Thomas's heartbeat. The dragon lifted one massive wing and stretched it across the void. Stars reflected on its scales, shimmering like water in sunlight. Thomas watched in awe. The creature's movements were slow but deliberate, graceful and wise. He realized the dragon was trying to show him something, a memory perhaps, a feeling or a lesson. He focused, opening his mind as much as he could. Images and emotions flowed through him. Colors, lights, stars being born, worlds alive with life. It was beautiful and overwhelming, and Thomas felt tears on his cheeks. For the first time he understood that the dragon was not dying, it was fading because it had no purpose left. It had been the guardian of the stars, the watcher of life, and now the universe had stopped noticing. Thomas thought about humans. They were small, weak, and often careless. But they never stopped looking up. They never stopped asking questions. They never stopped dreaming. And maybe that was enough. He reached out with a device he had built in his lab, a simple transmitter that could send signals not as words, but as patterns of light and energy. He sent pulses of hope, joy, and wonder, the best of human emotions captured in pure energy. The dragon responded immediately. Its glow flared, brighter than Thomas had ever seen. It moved closer, and he felt the warmth of its presence, not heat, but something deeper, a feeling of being alive again. For hours they floated together, sharing light and energy. Thomas realized something incredible: he was not the one helping the dragon. The dragon was helping him too. It reminded him of the vastness of the universe, of the beauty and fragility of life, and of the power of care and attention. He felt connected to something much larger than himself, something that stretched across galaxies and time. When Thomas finally looked at his ship's clock, he realized he had been there for a full day. Yet time felt meaningless in this quiet place. He had found a friend, a teacher, and a guide. The elder dragon was still fading, but less so than before. Its light was stronger, and Thomas felt hope growing inside him. He knew the journey was just beginning. Before leaving, Thomas spoke again softly, "I will not forget you. I will tell the world. And maybe they will care too." The dragon's eye blinked slowly as if acknowledging the promise. Thomas felt a warmth he could not describe, a connection that went beyond words. As he prepared to return to Earth, he looked back at the massive dragon one last time. It floated in the vast darkness, wings spread, glowing faintly but steadily. And Thomas knew, deep in his heart, that this was only the first step. Humans could make a difference. They could remind the universe that life, wonder, and memory mattered. And maybe, just maybe, they could save the elder dragons too. Thomas returned to Earth with a fire in his chest. He had seen the Elder Dragon, a being older than stars themselves, fading in the dark void of space. But he had also felt its hope, its longing to be remembered. And he knew he could not keep this to himself. He had to share it. Back on Earth, Thomas worked tirelessly. He had no armies, no magic, no extraordinary technology, only his small lab, a few computers, and an unshakable belief that humans could reach further than anyone thought. He designed a signal, not just any signal, but one that carried human life itself. Music, voices, stories, laughter, and even the silent beauty of a sunset. Every sound, every image, every thought that made humans human would travel into space. He named it the message of wonder. At first, people laughed. Scientists called it pointless. Governments said it was a waste of resources. But Thomas did not stop. He believed that even if one being, one creature could see the message, it would be enough. And slowly people began to notice. Children sent in drawings. Artists sent in paintings. Musicians sent songs. Farmers, teachers, and engineers sent small pieces of their daily life. The signal grew not with power but with humanity. When the transmission was ready, Thomas watched as it left Earth, carried by satellites and energy waves, moving faster than he could imagine. It spread across the solar system and beyond, reaching planets, moons, and stars. And far out in the dark, something answered. The Elder Dragon's glow pulsed in rhythm with the signal. It moved closer to the source, curiosity shining in its ancient eyes. Thomas watched through his instruments as the dragon's body brightened with each wave of human emotion, its fading scales shimmering with new light. It was as if every story, every note, every image had given it a reason to exist again. But Thomas did not stop there. He realized the signal could do more than reach one dragon. He widened it, sending it across the galaxy beyond the systems humans had ever explored. To his amazement, other beings began responding. Not all were dragons. Some were species Thomas had never known existed. Some sent pulses of light back. Some sent sounds. Some simply reflected the signal. And slowly, the galaxy began to remember itself. Through the signal, the Elder Dragon communicated with Thomas in a new way. Not with words, but with light and thought. It showed him glimpses of its memory, the rise of planets, the first civilizations, the joy of discovery, and the sadness of neglect. It shared the wonder of a universe that was alive with stories, and it reminded Thomas that even when everything seemed lost, there was still a thread that connected all life. Thomas realized that the dragon had been waiting for this. It had waited not for power, not for fear, not for worship, but for attention. It needed someone or something to notice that it existed, to see its purpose, and to carry that memory forward. And humanity, small and fragile as it was, had done exactly that. The dragon's voice, or at least the feeling of it, filled Thomas's mind. Not anger, not command, but gratitude. It was a quiet, powerful feeling, the kind that settles deep inside and never leaves. And Thomas knew that this gratitude was not for him alone. It was for all humans who had ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. As the days passed, the signal grew stronger. More humans contributed. More stories traveled across the stars. Thomas watched as the Elder Dragon moved among the other cosmic beings, sharing the energy, passing the memory along. The galaxy seemed to breathe again, slowly waking from a long, cold sleep. Thomas also began to notice something amazing. The signal was not just reaching the dragons. It was reaching humans too. People began to feel a connection, a sense of wonder they had not felt before. They looked at the stars differently, listened to the songs in the signal, and remembered that life was not just about surviving, it was about caring, creating, and reaching beyond themselves. One evening, Thomas stood on a quiet hill outside his city, looking up at the night sky. The stars were brighter than ever. He could feel the pulse of the signal, the rhythm of life and memory spreading outward. And far above, he imagined the Elder Dragon, no longer fading, moving with purpose, glowing with the light of thousands of human dreams. Thomas smiled. He realized that humans, small as they were, had done something incredible. They had reminded the universe to care. They had shown that even the smallest voice could reach across galaxies. And in that moment he understood what it truly meant to be human. To see what is fading and to bring it back to life with curiosity, hope, and love. The Elder Dragon pulsed one last time, a soft, glowing wave that seemed to say, "We remember. We are alive. And now so are you." Thomas felt the weight of the galaxy lift slightly. He knew this was only the beginning, but it was a start. Humans had begun to touch the stars, not with weapons or power, but with wonder. And for the first time in millennia, the Elder Dragons were not alone, and Earth had truly made its mark in the universe. The galaxy had begun to wake. The signal Thomas had sent was still moving outward, carrying the stories, songs, and voices of humanity to the stars. Far from Earth, the elder dragons gathered, drawn by the pulse of human life. They were no longer lonely. They were no longer fading. They were alive again in a way they had not been for thousands of years. Thomas watched through his instruments, his heart pounding. He could not see them with his own eyes, but he could feel them. The dragons had begun to communicate, not with words but with light, with feeling, with memory. Each pulse was a story, each wave a thought. They were speaking to one another and to him, and something extraordinary was happening. The elder dragons were choosing. Not a ruler, not a leader, not a master, but a caretaker. A being who could carry the memory of the universe forward. Thomas realized what this meant. They were looking at humanity. They were looking at Earth. And they were deciding whether humans were worthy of holding the future. For hours, days, and nights Thomas waited. He did not sleep. He did not eat. He could only watch as the dragons moved through the patterns of light and emotion, testing, measuring, remembering. They shared visions of worlds long gone, civilizations that had reached for greatness and then vanished. They showed him the cost of forgetting, the danger of ignoring life, and the beauty of remembering. Then one moment everything changed. A single dragon, older than all the others, drifted closer to the center of the signal. Its eyes, bright with star fire, focused not on Thomas but on Earth itself. And Thomas felt it. Not with his eyes, not with his ears, but in his heart. The dragon spoke, not in words, but in a feeling so deep it could not be described. We have waited. We have observed. And now we choose. The other dragons pulsed in agreement, sending waves of memory and light across the galaxy. Thomas understood immediately. They had chosen humans, not for strength, not for power, not for conquest, but because humans cared. Humans remembered. Humans reached for what was fading even when it seemed impossible. Humans could carry the responsibility of connection. Thomas's chest tightened with emotion. He wanted to speak, to thank them, to promise that humans would not fail. But the feeling was already complete. The dragons had made their choice. They were passing their role forward. They were not leaving the universe. They were becoming part of it in a new way. They would no longer need to guard alone, for humanity would remember for them. He watched as the dragon's light began to change. It was no longer soft, fading, and lonely. It became strong, steady, and warm. The dragons were becoming more than they had been, but also less in a way that did not feel like loss. They were no longer the only keepers of the stars. They were now guides, teachers, and stories. And humanity, small and fragile, would carry the flame forward. Thomas felt a wave of gratitude that left him breathless. Not for himself but for all humans. For every person who had ever looked up at the night sky, wondered about the stars, or dreamed of something larger than themselves. He understood that this was the true meaning of being human. It was not about conquering, winning, or dominating. It was about noticing, caring, and remembering. The elder dragons shared one final vision with Thomas. He saw Earth from space, small and fragile, yet full of life. He saw humans reaching out to the stars, building, creating, imagining. And he saw the dragons weaving themselves into the signal, joining humanity's message, becoming part of the story that would travel across the galaxy. They were no longer fading, they were alive in memory, in connection, in hope. For a long time Thomas simply watched. He felt tears roll down his cheeks, though he was alone. The universe, vast and cold, had not ignored them after all. Humanity had been chosen not because they were strong but because they dared to care. And the elder dragons had found a new purpose, one that would last for millennia. Finally Thomas spoke aloud, though no one could hear him. "We will not fail," he whispered. "We will remember. We will reach. We will care." And in that moment he felt the dragon's pulse in answer. It was not a voice, not a roar, not a command. It was a promise, bright and steady, that the future could be different. The galaxy seemed to exhale, slowly, as if it had been holding its breath for thousands of years. The stars burned a little brighter. The signals of life traveled farther than ever before. And far from Earth, the elder dragons moved among the stars, no longer alone, no longer fading, knowing that humanity would continue what they had begun. Thomas returned to Earth, carrying the knowledge that humans, though small, were powerful in a way no weapon or technology could measure. They had been trusted with the greatest gift of all, the memory of the universe. And he knew that the future, though uncertain, was full of hope. Because humans, fragile and imperfect as they were, had finally been seen. Thomas stood on a quiet hill outside the city, looking up at the stars. The night was clear and the stars shimmered brighter than ever. He could feel it in his heart, the pulse of the signal traveling across the galaxy, carrying the voices, songs, and stories of humanity. And far beyond the reach of human eyes, he imagined the elder dragons moving among the stars, glowing with renewed light, their purpose restored. Earth, so small and fragile, had made its mark. Not with weapons, not with power, not with war, but with care, attention, and imagination. Humanity had reminded the universe that life mattered, that memory mattered, that connection mattered. For thousands of years, the elder dragons had waited for someone to notice. That someone was not a god, not a hero, not a conqueror. That someone was a human. Thomas remembered the first time he had seen the elder dragon, drifting alone in the void, faint and fragile. Its wings had stretched across space like silver and gold, and its eyes had held sadness deeper than anything he had ever felt. And now it was no longer fading. Its light was steady, strong, warm. And it had shared that light with humanity. He thought of the children who had contributed to the signal, the artists and musicians who had sent their voices, the farmers and teachers who had shared the simple beauty of daily life. They had all reached outward, across space and time, and their small efforts had carried hope to creatures older than the stars. Thomas felt pride but also humility. Humans were not perfect. They had made mistakes, caused pain, and often forgotten the world around them. But they also had the ability to wonder, to dream, to care, and to act when it mattered most. That was their true strength. That was what the elder dragons had seen. From the hilltop, Thomas activated a small transmitter he had built. He did not need it anymore to reach the dragons, they could sense humanity through thought and feeling. But he wanted the people of Earth to hear it too. He sent a simple message into the night sky, a wave of music, laughter, and quiet stories. A reminder that even in the vast darkness, life and hope still existed. And the world listened. Across Earth, people looked up at the stars with new eyes. They felt something they had not felt in generations. A connection to the universe, to the stars, and to something greater than themselves. For the first time in a long time, humans did not feel small. They felt part of something vast, beautiful, and alive. Far from Earth, the elder dragons responded. Their massive forms drifted through space, wings moving slowly and gracefully. They sent pulses of light and thought, communicating with each other and with the humans who had reminded them of their purpose. And as they pulsed, the stars themselves seemed to shine brighter. Planets twinkled, comets arced across the sky, and distant worlds hummed with quiet life. The universe was awake again, and Earth had helped awaken it. Thomas smiled, feeling a warmth that was not from the sun or the stars, but from knowing that humans had truly mattered. The galaxy had trusted them, and they had risen to the occasion. Not with weapons or power, but with empathy, curiosity, and courage. In the days that followed, humanity continued to send messages into space. Children added drawings of their pets, their families, and their homes. Scientists sent pictures of distant planets, poems, and equations. Musicians composed songs that carried the rhythm of Earth itself. And the elder dragons received them all, pulsing in response, growing stronger, moving among the stars, teaching, guiding, and remembering. Thomas watched it all and knew that Earth's last stand was not a battle. It was a choice. The choice to care when no one else would. The choice to reach out across space, to imagine, to believe, and to act. That choice had saved not only the elder dragons but had also reminded humanity of its true strength. One night, as Thomas lay on the hill looking at the sky, he imagined the dragons soaring across the galaxy, weaving their light into the pulse of human life. He felt a calm he had never known. Earth was not the center of the universe. It was small, fragile, and imperfect. But it had been seen. And for the first time in millennia, it had mattered in ways far greater than anyone could have imagined. And Thomas understood the final truth of their story. The universe does not survive because of power, or strength, or conquest. It survives because someone, somewhere, chooses to notice. Someone chooses to care. And humanity had done exactly that. Earth's last stand was not a battle fought with weapons. It was a stand of hope, memory, and love. And in that quiet, shining moment, Thomas knew that the stars themselves would remember. Because humans, fragile and small as they were, had reached for the stars. And in doing so they had reminded the universe to reach back. And for the first time Earth was not alone.